In August of 1905, thousands of Tanganyikan warriors converged to attack the German military headquarters at Mahenge, an act meant to seal a long overdue resistance against the German colonial administration. All they had was their spear, their shield, poisoned arrows, and the water in the bottles at their chests, which they believed had made them unkillable, that the German bullets waiting for them had already turned to rain. But behind the fence of that garrison stood 60 askari and a German commander named Lieutenant Theodor von Hassel with 2 machine guns, and they were all that stood between a German colony and collapse. If this hill falls, the road to Germany's grip on all of East Africa falls with it. On the other side, the officers in the garrison knew that if this position breaks, there is nothing else behind it for 100 miles. 2 sides, each certain that everything ends here. Only one of them is right. This is the story of what the other believed in and what that belief cost. By the turn of the century, the flag of the German Empire flies over a colony larger than Germany itself. Deutsch Ostafrika, German East Africa, stretching from the Indian Ocean coast to the Great Lakes of the interior. German rule here has never rested easy. Just years before, the coastal uprising of Abushiri was crushed and its leader hanged. In the south, the Hihi people fought the Schutztrupp, the colonial army, for the better part of a decade before their king, Mkwawa, took his own life rather than be captured. The Germans severed his head and sent it back to Europe as a trophy. These wars are meant to have taught the tribes of German East Africa the futility of resistance. They have not. In 1902, Governor Gustav Adolf von Goetzen orders villagers across the south to plant cotton. It is a crop nobody eats and nobody wants, grown at the expense of the millet and maize that feed a family. Enforced through local overseers called akidas, men drawn from the coast and given power over people not their own. Quotas are set. Those who fall short are flogged. Village headmen are made to answer for their neighbours' harvests. Men are pulled away to labour on plantations and building projects, leaving women to shoulder work that was never theirs alone to carry. Then, in 1905, the rains fail. Drought settles over the land, on top of every other burden the Germans have placed there. It is in this climate, sometime in 1904, that a little-known man named Kinjekitile Ngwale vanishes from his home at Ngarambe, near the Rufiji River. He is a member of the Matumbi people, and by trade, something between a healer and a diviner. He returns after several days and tells a story. I was pulled beneath the water and possessed by a spirit named Hongo, taking the shape of a great snake who speaks for a still greater deity called Bokero. Kinjekitile begins to call himself by that name. He tells his people that the time of the German has ended and that heaven itself has chosen this generation to remove him. One recorded message, passed hand to hand through the villages, put the call plainly. This is a year of war, for there is a man at Ngarambe who has been possessed. Because we are oppressed by the akidas, because we work without payment, because there is help now at Ngarambe. The proof of Kinjekitile's power, he says, is a liquid he distributes to his followers, Maji, the Swahili word simply for water, mixed with millet seed and castor oil. Drink it, wear it, carry it in a bottle at your chest, and German bullets striking your body will turn to water and fall away harmless. It is, by any modern accounting, nothing more than water, but it does something no German administrator anticipated. It gives dozens of peoples who have never fought as one, Matumbi, Ngindo, Yao, Ngoni, Bena, Pagoro, Zaramo, a shared reason to believe that this time, together, they might win. On the 20th of July 1905, Matumbi villagers cut down a field of cotton grown under forced labour. A small act, but a declaration. On the 31st, armed with spears, bows and poisoned arrows, They march on the German post and trading station at Samanga and burn it to the ground, along with its cotton stores. Some later accounts place the very first spark slightly earlier, at a place called Nandet. The sources disagree, though not on what followed. German troops move quickly to arrest Kinjekitile. On the 4th of August, he is hanged for treason. Before the noose closes, he tells his captors that it no longer matters, that the medicine has already been carried to Kilosa, to Mahenge, to every corner of the territory. He is, in this much, telling the truth. 10 days after his death, Ngindo warriors ambush a party of missionaries travelling in safari, spearing all 5 to death, among them Bishop Cassian Spiss, the Catholic bishop of southern Zanzibar, present-day Archdiocese of Dar es Salaam. The following day, rebels overrun the German police post at Liwale. Through the rest of August, the uprising rolls outward from the Matumbi Hills like a grass fire, striking garrisons, mission stations, and the railway line the Germans have been building inland. On the 16th and 17th, Mbunga and Ngindo fighters destroy the trading post at Ifakara and its small garrison, opening the road to the most important German fortification in the south, the station at Mahenge. On the 30th of August, the assault on Mahenge began. An estimate of 8,000 warriors, Ngindo and Mbunga fighters, led not by Kinjekitile's spirit, but by 2 different commanders. But the attacking forces could not agree on when to strike, and coordination between them collapsed before the first shot was fired. It would cost them everything. The first column comes from the east, across open ground in daylight, in the open, in full view of the station's walls. No cover, no flanking maneuver, nothing but numbers and a strong belief in the sacred water. While this tactic would have worked well in traditional regional warfare to overwhelm enemies via sheer numbers, but today it will prove fatal on this ground against the German automatic weapons. Von Hassel's gunners already on a higher ground, a strategic position. Let them close to by some meters before the guns open fire. At that range, there is no missing. Men fall in rows, cut down mid-stride, and still the column comes on. For almost a quarter of an hour they stand into it, screaming, falling, closing the gaps in their own line with the men behind them, before whatever is left of that courage finally breaks and the survivors scatter back into the grass, leaving the dead behind them in the open where they fell. The next day, a different force attacks from the north, and here the ground itself turns against the defenders. This side of the station is built up, cluttered, broken by huts and walls, and the kind of cover that a cleared killing field does not allow. For the first time, men reach the fence itself. Von Hassel, watching this, does not simply hold the line and keep firing. He sends his own native auxiliaries out past the wall to meet the attackers in close combat, hand to hand, spear and poisoned arrow against bayonet. It is here, too, that the battle collapses into brutal close-quarters fighting. Bayonets stab through the smoke, spears thrust from behind walls, poisoned arrows hiss through the narrow lanes at point-blank range. From this scramble in the north, fought at a range where the Maji's promise could finally be tested against a spear point instead of a bullet. And yet, it failed. By the time the attackers withdraw, estimates of their dead range from 600 to as many as 3,000 men. The true number was never counted, only guessed at by the men who did the shooting. 20 of the defenders' own auxiliary soldiers are reported killed. Mahenge does not fall. But the fighting is not over. Governor von Goertzen cables Berlin for reinforcements, and Kaiser Wilhelm answers with warships. The cruisers Bussard, Seeadler and Thetis are ordered to the coast, along with marine infantry and troops pulled from as far away as German New Guinea. By autumn, close to 2,000 German-led soldiers, drawn from regular Schutztruppe companies, local Askari regiments, and irregular auxiliaries known as Ruga Ruga are converging on the south. Even as Mahenge holds, the rebellion gains its most formidable recruits, the Gwangara Ngoni, descendants of warrior clans who fled south from the wars of Shaka Zulu generations before, muster some 5,000 fighters to the cause. It is against this Ngoni camp that German troops, marching out from Mahenge with their machine guns, strike on the 21st of October 1905. The Ngoni are cut down in the open. Oral tradition among survivors holds that as they broke and ran, warriors flung away their bottles of Maji, crying out that the medicine was a lie. Whether those exact words were ever spoken cannot be verified, but the effect that day is beyond dispute. For thousands who had staked their lives on the water's promise, the promise had visibly, bloodily failed. The rebellion does not end that afternoon, but its spiritual foundation begins, from that day, to crack. What follows is not a single war, so much as 2 more years of scattered, grinding conflict, as the front dissolves into the bush of the southeast. Conducting guerrilla warfare against the German, men like Major Kurt Johannes, Lieutenant Gustav von Blumenthal, Lieutenant Friedrich von Lindeiner Wildau, march and countermarch between outposts, ambushed constantly, gathering at strong points like Kitanda to press what has become a guerrilla campaign against fighters who no longer believe in bulletproof water, but still refuse to submit. And it is here that the German response turns from battle to something closer to engineered starvation. Captain Wangenheim writes plainly to Governor von Goetzen that only hunger and want can bring about a final submission. Military action alone will remain a drop in the ocean. And so, a scorched earth policy was made, a policy that will be remembered as the Great Hunger. Villages are burned, grain stores are destroyed, fields are put to the torch before harvest. Some account records that livestock were slaughtered and left to rot. Troops burned entire villages to the ground to deny Maji Maji fighters shelter. This forced tens of thousands of women, children, and elderly civilians to flee deep into the forests and rocky caves. By the start of 1906, chief after chief was surrendering, not because their men had lost the will to fight, but because they could no longer watch their own people starve for it. On the 27th of February 1906, 66 of those chiefs and elders are led to a single tree outside a town not yet named after any of them, and hanged, one after another, before a crowd of their own people gathered to watch. Among the condemned is Nduna Songea Mbano, the Ngoni sub-chief who had led the resistance in this region from its opening days. He had already surrendered. The Germans offer him a place in their colonial administration, his life, his position, in exchange for his cooperation. He refuses. According to the oral history later collected from his own people, his answer was this: that he must be hanged, because all his comrades were already gone, and he had no one left to speak for. The Germans grant his request. He is hanged last, after the 66 others, and afterward his head is severed and shipped to Germany, where it remains to this day. His body is buried in Songea without it. The toll of that famine is the true horror of the Maji Maji War. Historians' estimates for the dead, from combat, but overwhelmingly from the famine that followed it, range from around 75,000 to as high as 200,000 or 300,000 people. Later generations in Tanzania would look back on the Maji Maji Rebellion not as a defeat, but as a beginning, the first rehearsal of a unity that would, half a century later, carry the territory to independence. In 2023, more than a century after the last shots were fired, the German president stood before Tanzanian officials and, for the first time, offered an apology for what German rule had done in the name of cotton and control.
My dear family, I mourn with you for Chief Sangea and for all the others who were executed. I wish to pay my respects to the victims of the German colonial rule. And as German president, I would like to ask for forgiveness for what Germans did to your ancestors here. I beg your forgiveness, and I would like to assure you that we Germans will search with you for answers to the open and answer outstanding questions that give you no peace